a house in Swindon?
No.
Do you have family still there?
No, I don't. No, my
Don't
family
mention
were all,
Swindon.
my family were all rather old, and I mean, it was just a generation of.
Right, I thought we'd start, if that's okay with you, we'd take you
Yes.
right back to your childhood. And what an interesting childhood it was. Born in Wiltshire, in Swindon.
In Swindon, yeah.
Correct. Next to your grandfather's house.
I was born in the house next to my grandparents' house, yes, because my parents were living with my grandparents and there was no room, I wouldn't say at the inn, but in their house. So it was in the railway village of Swindon, yes.
And your grandfather had a real influence on sort of your musical upbringing, didn't he?
Very much. I mean, he must have died when I was maybe about 6, but I can clearly remember him. I remember his height. He was a very tall man, and he worked in the railways as well, which both of my parents escaped by kind of educating themselves and getting scholarships. I think that was the purpose of most people in Swindon, was to escape working in the Great Western Railway. But yeah, he had a piano, which a lot of families had after the Second World War, because they were subsidised, I think, for home entertainment.
Yeah.
And he had a fantastic record collection as well, which had a real, which I inherited when he died, and which just fascinated me. Yeah, and it really introduced me to
the
popular
world.
music. Yeah, to popular music.
So your grandfather sort of opened your eyes. Were your parents equally as supportive in that capacity, sort of?
Yes, very much. I mean, my parents, like I say, were both teachers, and they were kind of new age for that time in the early 50s. And they encouraged me to sort of go my own way. And I think that they bought me a ukulele. All I wanted was to play guitar. And they said, well, you have a ukulele first, because it only costs, $2 bob. And so I learnt to play that easily, but I still kept pestering for a guitar. So I got a guitar when I was about 10, I think, 8 or 10.
I think I read you played the ukulele, you learned the piano around the same sort of...
Yes, I struggled with music, with reading music when I was playing piano. I think a lot of children do.
When you were sort of becoming more familiar with these instruments, was there a point where you thought, maybe I do have a natural ability, or was it just, children playing or just sort of having a hobby?
I realised that it opened a kind of world of imagination, music, for me, that I didn't have that in common with a lot of other children. And I suppose, but by the time I was about 10, I knew that music was my only destiny.
Was your calling?
Was a calling, yeah.
That's it's lucky to find that out at 10. I mean,
Yeah,
people go through
absolutely.
their whole lives without sort of
Sure.
truly finding their calling.
Yeah.
So you kept your music up, and I think you played in youth clubs in Swindon, and you were doing a lot of Buddy Holly covers at the time, I believe. Was he a hero or an inspiration for you?
Well, Elvis, of course, was the king at the time when I was growing up, but Buddy Holly was really number one, if I can put it that way. But because Buddy was the first person I saw on television or listened to on the radio that wasn't standing out the front of a group. All the other singers I'd seen the musicians were behind and the singer was out front. I mean, the first singer that really influenced me was a man called Johnny Ray, who had this kind of cry in his voice.
Yeah.
And then Elvis, of course, but I knew I was no Elvis. And then Buddy came along, who wrote his own songs, who played in the band with guitar, lead and rhythm. And I think a lot of us looked up to him at that time. And I've since, going to America a lot, realised that he was a lot more popular, or more famous maybe, in the UK than he was in the US. But he certainly was the man that I idolised. And of course, I learnt all of his songs, and they were easy to do in a group, and people knew them from youth clubs and things. So, yeah.
What I thought was quite interesting. So at this period in your life, you're performing, you're learning your trade, you're finding your voice, but you also went out and got 5 O levels. I think a lot of musicians today would struggle to spell O levels. But was education important to you at the same time?
It was. I'm a child from that very fortunate generation of grammar schools, and I passed what was then known as the 11+. It wasn't that I was that smart or anything, it's just that my parents knew one thing. They knew how to tell me how to pass an exam.
Yeah. But
And because they were both
frustrated,
teachers.
yeah.
Yeah, and so that wasn't a great trial for
No.
me.
We're building towards what you may describe yourself as a pretty unsavoury moment in your career, or maybe a slight blemish. That contract you signed into at 16 or 17,
Yeah, 17 was, yeah.
where you relinquished a lot of the rights to
Mm-hmm.
your biggest hits, essentially.
Yes.
Pre-1974. I don't want to, tread on your toes too much, but in looking back at that, do you look back with anger, or can you be a bit more philosophical at this point?
I try to be philosophical. Very well put, Sammy, if I may say so. But I try to be philosophical, but I can't help anger coming into it, or resentment coming into it at 5 o'clock in the morning when I wake up and run these things through my mind.
But it looked to me very much to be an onerous and deeply, deeply unfair agreement,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes, that's right. It is. It is, absolutely. But there's been no judge in the British Isles that's been brave enough to give any of us of my generation their copyrights back. They're very one-sided contracts.
So it was a problem not just with yourself, it was endemic in the music industry.
It was to certain of us. They were contracts that really were to do with the 1930s and 40s that were applied to some boys in the 60s, boys and girls in the 60s. But not to the ones who took the contract away and thought about it for an afternoon. I had no idea. I thought this was just a standard thing that every writer would sign. Well, it wasn't. And really, within a couple of years, those contracts were banished.
Would you, as you say, the laws probably changed and rightly
Yes.
for the better.
Yeah.
Would you advise any young musicians or any people going into the media industry in terms of how to deal with, situations that may arise? Is there anything you would tell them to stick to?
Well, first of all, I'd say trust your own judgment. Really, that's very important. But when you're my age, then what you think you want isn't quite what you need. And I would just say that if a contract is put in front of any young artist, then you should at least take a week to just think about it, to take some independent advice about it. I mean, my parents, I don't think I'd ever sort of met a lawyer, really, or a solicitor, and I certainly didn't have. There's nobody else on the contract. There's no witness for me, and or anything like that. But it didn't matter. But that's the only thing I'd say. Just first of all, trust your own judgment and follow your heart. But if there's a contract in front of you, take a few days to take a little bit of time.
That's noble advice, I think.
It was only when I had my first hit. First hit was a song called Fly Me High. Yes, and which the radio, the Light program picked up and used as a jingle. And then I thought, well, maybe I should be getting paid for this. And
and then it all surfaced.
Yes, it started to dawn on me.
But as I say, at that time, that was a very unsavoury incident, unfortunate, but it was at this point that you were moving into mainstream music, you were becoming familiar, you entered, you replied to an advertisement in The Melody Maker, you joined the Wild Three.
Yes,
you performed on the London Palladium.
Yes.
I mean, that must be pretty incredible
That
at
was
a very
fantastic.
young age.
I was very lucky that I went for this audition when I was just a kid when I left school. And I left Swindon as soon as I could.
What's wrong with Swindon?
It's a place you pass through when you pass by on the M4. And I've still got an affection for it. But if you want to make it in show business or the music business, you've got to go to London. And so I did, really, as soon as I left school. My parents just said, you do what you want. You're free, so just go and do it. As long as I wasn't a burden on them. And so I answered an ad in the Melody Maker. I was playing with Swindon groups, and I got to a house by Greenwich, and I knocked on the door, and a guy called Marty Wilde, who was a very famous rock star in the early 60s, opened the door. He's 6'5", Marty. So
You're quite tall.
Yes, I was 6'1" or 6'2", but I spent the next 2 years looking up at somebody, which was a new experience for me. But I learnt so much from him, and he's still my hero. I see him regularly now, and I'm still in awe of him.
Wasn't he the one that said, stick to the songwriting, the rest will come? Something of that.
He said, if you want to develop your own style and character, if you want people to know that you're you, then write your own material, because that's the way it'll be expressed. Funnily enough, I knew him before I signed this stupid contract. But I still didn't learn because he'd had a rotten experience too, and he was writing a lot of songs, but not under his own name.
Okay, so he was getting around it.
He was getting around it, yes, probably quite illegally, but by using another name.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was writing songs, and I started writing seriously when I was with him, yeah.
Fantastic.
And he was just great, and like I said, I'm still in awe of him to this day. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. It's nice to have a role model
fantastic,
that
yeah.
continues. So we're entering into the Moody Blues era. You answered another ad.
Yes, Melody Maker
in
was
the Melody
kind
Maker. I wish we could all have a Melody Maker ad. I mean, it would solve unemployment. Yeah, I mean, you did get a bit of luck. Would you put anything down to luck or fate that this Melody Maker would once again inspire a development in your career?
I really would, yes. It had huge small ads pages, and it was the thing to do to advertise in it and to answer ads in it. And I must say I'd answered quite a few and got absolutely nothing. But this one was to do with something in Eric Burden's office, the animals.
The animals. And he actually passed your details on to the Moody Blues. It wasn't right for him.
No, that's right. It wasn't right for him. The songs weren't right for him, and he'd already found a guitar player. I wrote to him as a songwriting guitar player, not a singer, a songwriting guitar player. Wasn't right for him. He passed it to Mike Pinder of the Moody Blues, and a few weeks later I had a call completely out of the blue from Mike Pinder. And it was one of those glorious chances in life.
It's a lovely sequence of events that brought you to the Moody Blues. It just seems something was written.
Yes.
It was aligned.
Yeah. I was very, very fortunate, yeah. And also there was a couple of other guys that were in line for the Moody Blues job. Or even though I've known Chris Spedding for 40 years, only recently on the War of the Worlds tour did he tell me, he came to my dressing room one night and we had a chat, and he said, I answered the actual ad for the Moody Blues, which I didn't answer. And he said, and I went for the audition, I didn't get the part. He said, you were the right person for the part, though. He said it would have been terrible for me, and he was right.
Amazing how things work. Yeah. So you're joining the band, and at the time, the band was almost, from what I can interpret, going through almost a transition phase.
Absolutely.
You replaced Denny Kane.
Mm-hmm.
John Lodge replaced Rod Clark, who was actually only filling in, I believe, at the time.
He replaced a boy called Clint Warwick.
Yes, Clint Warwick, that was it.
Yes, not his real name.
Yeah, and then the first single you penned was "Fly Me High."
Yes.
Which didn't chart tremendously.
No,
but I think
not at all.
What it did do was it changed the style of the Moody Blues from R&B to contemporary, and I think that's that was almost the transition. But my question is, were you at all concerned with the fact that you were tinkering almost with the formula that had already worked, the Moody Blues? Did you consider it to be a risk at any point?
Well, Sammy, I was very pushy with my own songs, so I was putting those forward, and I found in the Moody Blues, in the keyboard player Mike Pinder, a soulmate, because he was a writer as well, but he couldn't really get his material into the band. And although the group started out as a rhythm and blues band, and a really good one, when Denny left, he took that rhythm and blues feel with him. He was really good at it, and he was the voice of it. He had that character. When he left, I think that me and the guys who were left realized we didn't have that in our hearts. The guys were playing it, but it needed Denny to lead it.
And then,
We weren't being true to ourselves with that rhythm, singing about the problems of the people in the deep south of America. We didn't know anything about it. We're all lower middle class boys from around England.
but then did that coincide with the entrance of the Mellotron, this instrument which probably really fused your work and the rest of the band's work? It really seemed to be the epicenter of what the Moody Blues then became. Was that a really important instrument? How would you value it?
Huge, massive, because Mike was a piano player, and he had... we did try quite a few of my songs on piano. In fact, Fly Me High is one with Mike playing piano on it. But it was never going to quite work until I think Mike really thought about my songs and his songs. And he came one day and he said, I know there's this company called Mellotronics, and they'd created this sound effects machine. And he said, and I know on this sound effects machine, keyboard thing, there's some orchestral sound. It was mostly things like cockerels and trains going through tunnels and whistles and ridiculous, you know, that kind of stuff, rulers on the side of tables. And jokey stuff. It was made for that. It was made for jokey things to do on the radio.
You harnessed it?
Well, he took the orchestra, it had 4 manuals, the first one that he had, and he took the orchestral side and duplicated it another 3 times. And so he had each 4 of the manuals, small little pieces of keyboard, were all orchestral sounds. And when he put that onto my songs and his songs, it just...
magic.
It was just magic. Yeah, it made my songs work.
And then in 1967, you obviously used the Mellotron for Days of Future Past.
Yes. On Days of Future Past, when you hear us playing, we're not playing with the orchestra. Our bits were recorded a few days before that. The London Festival Orchestra, which is a name we made up.
Right, okay.
Yes, it doesn't actually exist. It was just a load of gypsies, we used to call them, from different orchestras, session musicians. I wish I could have said that was our idea, but it was based on our stage show that we did.
What an album. I mean, we can't not talk about it. I'm sure you get asked all the time. But just how do you view it now? I mean, I've read recently that, you know, with hindsight and time, you've managed to really appreciate what a great piece of work it is. But I mean, just how did that even come about, that level of music?
Of course, it's all subjective, so one person's...
Things are subjective, but I think more people would agree than not.
I hope so. Well, we thought we were making a demonstration stereo record. Unfortunately...
For Decca.
For Decca, yes. And because they had a consumer division that sold record players. And we had a debt to them, which we could only replay by making stuff that they wanted us to do as a kind of house band. And they asked us to do this demonstration record. The fortunate thing for us was that they'd originally asked for us to record a rock version of Dvorak.
Yeah.
Peter Knight came to see us when they were planning this album, and he'd been given the task of doing the real Dvorak interspersed with our rock version of Dvorak. He came to see us at, I think it was the Hot 100 Club in Oxford Street. And after it, he said, it'd be much better if you did the stuff that you did on stage tonight, your sort of story of the day in the life of one guy. And I orchestrated round that. He said it would sound much better. So we recorded our stuff, and then Peter took our themes and expanded on them. But the great thing was, because it was meant to be a stereo demonstration album, it was recorded immaculately, which was unusual for the mid-60s, when people were moving away from really nice, smooth recordings and going into more punchy, very stuff, sounds that went down the middle of that would come out of a Dansette record player, really punchy in a 45. So that was the thing that made it for all time. It was immaculately recorded.
Well, they had to have the songs to boot as well, and Tuesday Afternoon and obviously Nights in White Satin are just tremendous hits. You know, we've already talked about the rights, but irrespective, just how proud are you to have wrote, such timeless classics?
Well, I didn't know that was going to be like that at the time. And I only wrote Nights because Mike had written a song called Dawn is a Feeling, which I really loved, and he asked me to sing.
That's a great song itself.
Yeah, fabulous. And then I wanted to write a sort of counterpoint to that for the stage show, which I did in Nights. Tuesday Afternoon was done quite late on, not far before the recordings actually of Days of Future Past, but it was the song that they released in America first. Apart from Go Now, which was before my time and with Denny, then Tuesday Afternoon was our biggest hit, in the US to date. And it did very well for us and introduced people to the album.
I've read somewhere that's the song you like to have on in the car.
What, Tuesday?
Tuesday Afternoon.
Well, it's so daft, really. It was quite a sort of throwaway thing.
I mean,
Yeah.
It's almost luck again, not luck, but
Yes.
you make your own luck, but it's probably the ones you least expected.
Yes.
Are the ones
That's
that are
right.
most treasured. It's probably
Very
always
true.
the way.
Yeah.
1967 was a great year, and we've
Yeah.
established that Days of Future Past was a great album. It was also the same year that the Beatles had Sgt. Pepper's Lonely
Yeah.
Hearts Club Band.
Mm-hmm.
What was your relationship to the Beatles? Like, was it unnecessary pressure? Were they a bigger brother you hated, or did you look up to them, or was it healthy competition? Was there a relationship?
Yes, because Mike and Ray could walk into Abbey Road Studios whenever they wanted. And when we were recording up the road at Broadhurst Gardens, which was the Decca Studios, only a couple of 100 yards away, Mike could just go, I was very envious of him because he could just go down, hey guys, and they'd have a little turn on, a little smoke and that kind of stuff. But the London music scene, it was only a couple of hundred sort of boys and girls really, and you knew everybody. You'd see them at the clubs afterwards. The Beatles would go to the clubs, the Bag of Nails and the Speakeasy, places like that. But they were the leaders of this particular group in London in that time, in the mid-60s. Everybody loved them, everybody adored them. But when they were in the company, myself included, they were the leaders. What they did, the rest of us would listen to and follow. But I think they were safe. They felt safe amongst other musicians. There was no pressure. There was nobody bothering them if they were in a club with other musicians or stuff like that. So for me, they were acquaintances at that time. Now, I didn't know, I couldn't say friends, but they were acquaintances. But they were always our leaders. And it was coincidence that we were doing Days of Future Past when they were doing Sgt. Pepper, really.
There was a forum online. People were claiming you to be the unofficial fifth Beatle. Did you ever look at them longingly or think, what if, or is the grass greener on that side? Or were you content with the product you were producing? The
Beatles were in a different stratosphere. They were on a different planet to the rest of us. And all I know is when I heard Love Me Do on the radio, I remember walking down the street and knowing my life was going to be completely different because the Beatles were in it. You could just tell from that one record.
Something special.
It was something special and something magical. And as long as they kept it together, they were going to do it. There was no envy or anything like that for them, no. They were our leaders, and we were very lucky to have them as our leaders in recording, as people, clothes,
flying the flag for
Britain
as well.
Yeah.
Justin, we're going to talk about your family life and how, at that point in time, during your success with the Moodies, things changed due to family. So in 1969, you married your wife Marie. In 72, you had a lovely daughter, Dorothy. And how much importance at the time, or even today, do you place on family life?
I got married in 1970.
I apologise.
No, not at all. But I knew Marie actually there was a whole gang of us. We were in a whole crowd with Graham's first wife, Carol, and we would always be together at parties, and even if I didn't see them in the group, I'd see them across the room with their girlfriends and things. And there came a time in that first few years when the first couple of years were spent in the back of a transit van and in dodgy little hotels and things, never thinking that we had to have any kind of place to actually put our stuff. Always taking advantage of other girls, say, that had some place to live, and we'd be on their floor or on their couch or something. And then I think as we started to have success and people started to recognize us and we started to travel a lot more, particularly to the United States, I think we needed some kind of anchor. Yeah, some kind of anchoring outside of the band. We'd only just seen ourselves as these guys romping around and never thought any further than that.
Was that transition from sex, drugs, rock and roll, for
Yes.
want of a better expression,
Yes, yeah.
to steady family life? Was that
Yeah.
a tricky one?
Well, I think there's probably the sex, drugs and rock and roll continued. But we needed to find ourselves as men, to find a place in life which we didn't have. We hadn't had any responsibilities before that for anybody else or even for ourselves. And we were living a very sort of enclosed life just with each other. It's a sort of fallacy with groups that you always think they're always together and living in the same house and eating together and laughing and friends all the time. They're not. It's very difficult.
Pressure pot, surely.
It is. And a lot of sort of alpha male stuff going on. And you know very well amongst a group of guys, you have to kind of hold your own, otherwise you'll get booted.
45 years later, or perhaps even more, still together.
Yes, absolutely.
So,
Yes.
I don't know how you weathered the storms, because you hear so many bands breaking up and getting back together, but
Yeah.
surely there was something
In the group,
a bit deeper between, there's a connection between you guys.
there's the connection that when we come together, that we play that music, something happens between us. And something happens on stage and it's transparent and it's quite apparent and quite lovely, yeah.
Did you find any backlash from your fans when you settled down and got married? Because I look at it today and I hear stories about Justin Bieber or One Direction. The fans hate it. The fans hate it when these young boys go out and get a girlfriend. Did you encounter any backlash?
I don't think so. In fact, I think I was the last in the band to get married, as a matter of fact. I was quite lonely being the only one left.
Bachelor.
The last bachelor, yes. But you have to know that at the time we were a band that kind of shunned any publicity. I had my moments because there was Fab 208 magazine and sort of Jackie and a couple of those magazines that latched onto me. But people didn't know who we were. They knew the music. I mean, we never smiled in a photograph until about 1978. That was just our image, the Moody Blues, and we rarely did interviews. We rarely did TV, and it probably stood us in good stead. We were just about the music.
You weren't in everyone's
No.
faces all the time.
No, we weren't public. I don't, we wouldn't keep a permanent publicist even. It was just about the music and about Decca, the Moody Blues, and London Records, and radio that loved us, the FM radio in America.
And speaking of the music, you did pen a song called Marie, and that was
Yes,
a bonus track in Songwriter, I think in 2004.
Oh yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Was that a case of Marie being a muse or you being a big softie? Are you a romantic in that sense? Was it something of that nature?
I think I was just struck one night with the kind of loneliness that comes sometimes with being a musician, and it was at a time when the group was apart, and that was quite a difficult time for all of us, really. Even though, like I say, we weren't always friends, to not have that base of being in a group, suddenly that's gone and that rug is pulled out from under you, which it was for about 4 years in the 70s. Then, on the night one night, I came to realise that you have very, very few true friends that are always going to be on your side. And I think Marie was one of those, and that song came out of that, yeah. I didn't intend it to ever be a hit record or even get played or anything. It was just an expression of what I thought at that moment.
That brings us nicely to this next juncture in your life. We're going to talk about your solo career. So between 67 and 74, you wrote 20 of the 27 Moody Blues singles, and then you took a 4-year break. What was the rationale behind that?
I could see us drifting apart. Mike wasn't happy in the UK, and I'm not sure he was all that happy in the band, really. But I remember we'd done an album called Seventh Sojourn, which was our seventh album, naturally, hence the title, and it wasn't a happy album. It wasn't a happy group of people. It was difficult. Relations were difficult between us, and we'd done a long world tour, and we came to have some studio time, and the other guys would rely on me. Oh, Joss will have something, to kick the album off. So I did. I had something. We started on this one track for our next album after Seventh Sojourn, and suddenly Tony Clark and I got a call from the canteen, a roadie, saying, "Hey, Joss, can you come downstairs and the other guys want to have a quick meeting?" And I said, "With Tony?" Is right. Yeah, both of you. So I came downstairs to the canteen in the studio, and there was the other four guys, and they just said, "It's not working. We don't want to continue with this." So I thought, oh dear. I didn't quite know what to do about it, but I had to accept it. And I thought, yeah, they're right. It's really not working. Although the song seemed to be working all right, the relationship definitely wasn't. Then I think we just drifted apart, and we just did not make any plans. And thankfully, there was never a moment where things were said that couldn't be unsaid. We just drifted apart, and I think there was an acceptance between all of us. Oh, well, I've got to do something. So I was under a lot of pressure from Decca to come up with something to release. So I actually went to America to do something with Mike, between the two of us. And then Tony Clark and John turned up at Mike's house as well. Mike took me in the other room and said, I don't want to work with anybody else, so I'm out of this project. So then it became me and John and Tony Clark. And then we made an album called Blue Jays, and then I think we realised that the Moody Blues is on hold. It's not working for a while, so there's no point trying to call everybody up and get everybody round a table.
But crucially, working with Tony Clark and
Yeah.
John Lodge, you never really strayed too far away from the Moodies.
No, we were the first people to use the studio that we'd built in West Hampstead, yes. After all those years, Decca gave us this studio, which we rebuilt as a Westlake audio studio, and the Moodies never made a single record in it. The first record was Blue Jays, yeah.
Were you enjoying the slight freedom or slight opportunity to diversify a bit? Was that something you were relishing?
I enjoyed making the album, and I enjoyed the company, and it was very much like a Moody Blues album, except that three of the guys weren't there. But I didn't feel secure in it. I don't think any of the three of us did. I didn't feel completely secure that this was the way that it should continue.
Something didn't feel...
Yes,
right.
at the end of it, yes, it didn't feel right.
1977, you released a solo album, Songwriter, which is a beautiful album, and I think Nostradamus personally is the pick of the bunch. What was your inspiration for that particular song?
Because, like a lot of other sort of pseudo-hippies at the time, I'd got into Nostradamus and making his predictions, and it fit the events that were actually happening in the world. I think it was probably that way round.
Quite a scathing interpretation of the world, or
yes.
damning opinion of society.
Yeah. I think that was a reflection of things that I got into in the late 60s and through the 70s, of sort of social comment and just worrying about the world. Particularly spending so much time in America and having this popularity, which was unusual for an English band to have that in America, and seeing the struggles that the young people were going through with being called up for national service and the universities, and we were a college band really in the US, and seeing what they were going through and trying to be a voice for that.
I mean, you were getting so big in America. I mean, did that increase your exposure in the UK, or increase your popularity back home?
It bounced back from America. I think there was a point when on our third album, which was called On the Threshold of a Dream, which was #1 in the UK, and a song called Question that got to #1, and that was the kind of peak of it in the UK. Our success after that was a bounce back from America by disc jockeys in the UK seeing the things that happened in America and giving,
Strange,
giving the American,
reverse.
it is, giving the American charts a listen and playing that stuff in the UK. It was kind of the reverse.
Where would you say you're bigger now, at this stage in your career, the US or back home in the
Thankfully, it's still about the same, and there's a very strong fan community in Great Britain and in Holland and in Belgium for the group. But America is still the place of my heroes.
Does it still scare you in that respect, though? Because you said, as you've just mentioned, you were seeing things you weren't particularly enamoured with.
Yeah.
Do you still see those?
Yeah, I do. There's still that stuff in Middle America. Yes, there's still those kind of problems. And some of America, working America, is quite different in thinking. You know, I realised that early on our very first tour, our proper tour, when we were opening up for a group called Canned Heat, who took us through real working class America. And I could see how different that was than, say, New York or Los Angeles or Chicago, or, you know, of the big cities. How different the attitude was in the real Midwest and in the real working America, and how you really had to be on your guard, along with tremendous hospitality as well that the Americans have.
I'm sure.
I mean, God bless America. I think I believe that being born a member of the greatest nation on earth gives something to your whole attitude and outlook in life that the British may have had at one time, but
Eroded.
it's eroded now, yes. It's something that happened a long time ago that's kind of quaint, but
Yeah.
not that relevant, really.
Yeah.
But the Americans have that spirit within them, and I find that, I still find that very attractive, and I'm enamoured of it.
Huge hit in America and the UK, in fact, around the world, is The War of the Worlds.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Jeff Wayne asked you to be involved because he had heard you were the singer of Nights in White Satin, so incredible privilege, I can only imagine, for him to ask you to sing Forever Autumn and The Eve of War. How would you rank that whole episode in your career alongside all your other achievements?
I would say that there was a great slice of good luck and
Again.
good fortune, like turning up at a house in Greenwich in East London and then getting a call from Mike Pinder suddenly completely out of the blue, and then having a call from Jeff Wayne. Yes, these things happened. And little did I know it when I recorded Forever Autumn from The War of the Worlds, but since then I can go anywhere in the world and sing that song, and there's people of my own generation or maybe even younger that know it and can share it, and it works anywhere. You can go anywhere and sing it, and people, hey, I love that, you know, and it's wonderful.
I could share it. I mean, I love it.
Yeah,
completely.
it's a great song. I was very fortunate.
How do you feel about Monsieur Gary Barlow taking your place in the latest?
Well, I know Gary, and I did know before that, and I knew that he had a particular fondness for The War of the Worlds and Forever Autumn, and I wish them well with it, yeah.
Is it something you'd look to do again?
Well, I did every tour until this recent 2012 tour.
Is this just a hiatus? Will you go back?
I don't know. I don't know whether the fact that they've done a new generation album with it, with new sounds, that I'd be able to go back. But there you go.
I think you've made those songs your own. I think in terms of the fans of The War of the Worlds, they'll always say Forever Autumn, The Eve of War. They're entrenched in Justin Hayward.
Maybe. I don't know. I miss it. I miss not being on this tour, but it was a tough tour, and really there came a time when I just wanted to do Moody's things and be with the other guys, and so I had to make that choice.
Your career has been littered with personal achievements and accolades. Does industry recognition, does that mean more than mere fandom? You know, that your colleagues are recognising your talent?
Thank you, and yes, it does. You know what Billy Wilder, the late Billy Wilder, said about awards when he was, I think he was given an honorary Oscar towards the end, and he said, awards are a bit like hemorrhoids. Sooner or later, every arsehole gets one. So that's kind of
It's a nice image.
Yes.
Descriptive.
I'll probably leave it at that.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going to talk about, we've talked about the good old days. Let's talk today, what's happening with the blues, yourself, and we'll go from there. February the 26th, I believe, your next solo album, your first since 1996, Spirits of the Western Sky. What can fans expect?
I was in a taxi the other day and the guy unusually recognised me and he said, "Oh, you're the Moody Blues bloke, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." So he said, you had your song on Ken Bruce. It was a song called In Your Blue Eyes, which is the opening track of the album, yeah. And I couldn't think of anything to say, really, because I didn't want to say, "Did you like it?" Because that would have been awful. So I said, "What did it sound like?" He said, "Oh, it sounded like the Moody Blues." So I thought, well, that's okay. I'll take that.
So we're going to expect a lot of similarity almost.
Yeah, I think so.
Similar sound.
It's made in the same studio that we've done a few Moody's recordings in the last few years.
In Italy, Genoa.
Yeah, in Genoa and in Nice and in a few places around Europe. And in Nashville, I did some songs, 3 of the songs in Nashville as well.
I read a quote and you said when you were recording A View from the Hill,
oh yes,
you said it was a really magical time.
Yes,
were
it was,
recording
yeah.
in Italy with your friends. Did
Yeah.
you encounter that same sort of magic when you were recording Spirits of the Western Sky?
It was very different, this new album, because this new album is much more about me, actually, what's in my heart and the things that I needed to express. The View from the Hill was a group that we had together of musicians that was a consistent group on every song, and it was made like that, with a group with me playing guitar, rhythm guitar and lead guitar and singing. This is much more my own songs that I started at home, took those recordings into the studio, did the vocal in one place where I know I get a great vocal sound, and then me and my best recording buddy, Alberto Parodi, co-produced it together, and I think it's really a labour of love that's from our hearts, and I think it's the truest thing I've ever done.
Really?
I had to exclude some material from Spirits, really, because I found that I'd started some songs that had quite a bit of sort of social comment in them. And I realised after I listened to everything that I just wanted to make it a romantic album about people that I know and to do it in that spirit of friendship and love, really. It is biographical, yes, and it's looking west.
Is there a meaning in that?
Yes, there is, because I was born in Swindon, which we talked about, and Swindon is a place that always looked west. You come over some hills, from there on, that's when the West Country starts. The people talk like they're West Country as well down there in Swindon. And so I found that wherever I go, I love to have a room with a view of the western sky. And my late brother and I, when we were small, we had a room at the back of the house in Swindon that overlooked the sunset, and both for he and I, it was kind of magical, and I could almost see towards America, knowing that one day I would actually be there. And so to this day, wherever I go, I have to live in a place that sees the western sky, yes.
Someone else who worked on the album is a composer, Anne Dudley.
Yes.
And you've spoken very fondly about her.
Yeah.
What makes her so special?
She is someone that is guaranteed to put her heart and her feeling into the orchestrations and the music that she writes. I've worked with her a couple of times before and been very, very impressed. And until I knew Anne, I'd never met anyone like that since Peter Knight, who'd done our first album. So I just called her up and asked her, and she said, "Yeah, great." And I know she's very busy and very much in demand. In fact, she's the girl who played all the live piano for the singers in Les Mis, in this new version of Les Mis.
Film?
She's the one actually playing the piano for them to sing to on the set. She's in the centre of the music world.
Why In Your Blue Eyes? Is that the opening?
Yes. There's things that happened to me in my teenage years and early 20s, and people that happened to me that made a huge impression on me, and it's just about someone that I hope is still there and sometimes thinks of me the way I do them, that's all.
I don't think I'd be forgiven by any of your fans if I didn't mention this Rock and Roll Hall of Fame saga that keeps going on year on, with the Moody Blues being snubbed. I know you've gone on record personally and said it doesn't mean a tremendous amount to yourself, but to the fans, can you understand their
everything.
frustration?
To the American fans, I can absolutely understand what it means, yes, the sort of injustice of it, yes, because I live my life adoring other musicians and records and listening to music every day and discovering something new every day. But like we said at the beginning, you know, music is subjective. I know we often say in the band, if we'd have packed it in, you know, in 1973, we'd probably be in the Hall of Fame. But because we continued, it kind of makes it difficult for them. It's easier for them to have dead people and people who aren't active anymore in the Music Hall of Fame.
You say you listen to music and different musicians every day. Is there anyone in particular at the moment, maybe a new crop of musicians or any new artists that you're a fan of?
You know, I'm back to buying singles on iTunes like I used to do when I was a kid, where I listen to one song, I find out who it is, or I Google the lyric. There'll always be a sort of a young kid walking along the street with a song in his heart that's going to turn me on as a person and enrich my life. And that's very gratifying. It's not always going to come through X Factor or any of those kind of programs.
Well, let me ask you about X Factor.
Yeah.
Or reality talent shows in general. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
I feel a bit for the boys and girls who do it, because they're going to have it sort of tattooed on their forehead for the rest of their lives. Oh, you're the bloke who came third in X Factor. So you have to be aware that your 15 minutes of fame is going to stay with you forever, and people are going to reference you by that.
But it can catapult some.
Absolutely.
I mean, Leona Lewis, I'm just...
Totally, that's right.
One Direction of the biggest boy band
in America,
world.
Massive, yes, yeah.
JLS.
Yeah.
And then for others, it doesn't quite work. I remember a couple of years ago, winner Matt Cardle, he actually sung Nights in White Satin.
Yeah.
You know, you don't hear much about him these days. Don't. So I think what you're saying is right. You have to be cautious that you're not labelled. If it doesn't quite work for you, then...
You need something more after that, and I think they've got to use that as a stepping off place and really push themselves forward. We're all in the group very grateful to Matt, because he did Nights, and the very next week our version came back into the charts.
As we all know, the Moodies are still touring. You're still extremely active as a band, and you are going to be commandeering a cruise ship in March, I believe. Now, when I'm on a cruise, if I've been on a cruise, I see the same people around the boat every day. I don't know how you're going to do it. Are you not worried there's going to be no escape? I know your fans are probably very nice, but are you not concerned in any way?
I think that the agent was very concerned about that. I love being on the road. I go on the road for a rest, because I just have to sort of worry about, well, I don't like those kind of biscuits or something like that. But I have to do the gig and sing it properly and put my heart into it. Otherwise, our music doesn't work unless you do it sincerely. But the other people on it, I mean, Stephen Bishop is on it.
Supporting
one of my heroes.
Yeah.
And the Zombies, Colin Blunston, they're on as well. I was quite amazed at all these other people. Perhaps they think it's the Zombies tour and the Moody's are also on. Yes.
That's going to be a great experience, I'm sure.
It will be, yeah. It'll be a lot of fun. Yeah. Moody's fans are really nice.
Yeah.
They are, and they're a great group of people, and I know they'll be having a ball.
Oh, I'm sure you will as well.
They will, yeah.
There's been much talk of a Moody's DVD, which
yeah.
might include some of the new songs. Is any news on that?
I don't know. With the Moody's, I just don't know. I can see it going that way, because the most successful things we've done over the years have been, say, for PBS, and live at Red Rocks was one of the greatest things we ever did. And there's another one called Lovely to See You that was done at the Greek Theatre, and then the Royal Albert Hall as well with the orchestra. And those have been the most popular things, and that's what people seem to like. We'll see. I'll see what happens when we get back together again, when we get back on the bus.
Sitting on the fence.
Yeah.
Diplomatic.
I don't know. If I knew, I'd say.
So we're going to finish, Justin, with some fun questions, just to tease out some of your personality traits. Favourite film?
Dr. Strangelove.
Favourite colour?
Green.
Manual or automatic?
Once was manual, now committed automatic.
Fruit or veg?
Fruit.
Coronation Street or EastEnders?
Corrie, I suppose.
Fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Answered quickly.
Mm.
Bourbon or custard creams?
Custard creams.
Rain or snow?
Rain.
And that is the end of that little...
I'm sorry, it was so
no,
short.
They were great
yeah.
answers. They were great answers. Listen, what a pleasure it's been to interview a real legend. And can I just say, doing the research for this interview, I really got to know your music and I genuinely became a fan. So it's been a real pleasure. I thank you a lot, Justin.
Oh, thank you, Sammy, yeah.
Thus, bringing an end to the first of this My Celebrity Interview mini-series. Thank you very much to Justin Hayward. Thank you.